Today we have some exciting news out of 11 Labs. They just released a feature called Gen FM, and we've talked before on this channel about Notebook LM, which is Google's podcast generator. It does a little bit more than that, but the exciting thing is that it can generate a conversational podcast off of any input you give it, whether it's a YouTube video or a website. 11 Labs now has this, and I actually tested it out. It's pretty impressive. I uploaded a video. Sorry, I didn't upload a video. I just posted a link to one of my YouTube videos and just clicked generate podcast, and it generated an over 10. It's 11-minute podcast about my video. So it's pretty amazing stuff. I'll play a little bit for you. You have to do it on mobile, so that's the trick. You have to have the it's called 11 Reader app by 11 Labs on iOS. So only on iOS, and it's only on phone for now. But let me play a little bit for you here.
Feet could be transformed into a work of art for less than the cost of a fancy coffee maker. Today, we're diving into the world of micro-cement flooring, a DIY trend that's revolutionizing home renovation.
Oh, now that's an intriguing.
Oh my
opening.
goodness.
Talking about some kind of miracle material.
So it's got two voices. There's they're both British people, which
Wow.
sometimes can sound a little bit more a little more podcasty than American voices. But nonetheless, it was very impressive. The video is about micro cement floors. Me and my wife did a project on our Airbnb. But it pulled the entire script and generated a podcast off of it. So it wasn't just, an overview of based on the title or description of the YouTube video. It was actually based on the script. And it only took like 3 or 4 minutes to generate. So super impressive.
Oh my gosh, that is absolutely insane. There's actually a whole bunch of really interesting things here that I think are happening, especially in light of the Google competition. The one thing we did want to say, though, before we get into it, is if you haven't already joined our AI Hustle School community, every single week, Jamie and I, we drop an exclusive podcast piece of content. We break down a software. We show you more how to use a tool like this 11 Labs tool, what we're using it for, how much money we're making, and all of our AI side hustles and all the ways we're using AI to grow our businesses. And it is currently on a Cyber Monday deal. So I know last week we told everyone we're going to raise it to $100 a month this week, but I realized today's Cyber Monday and I can't in good faith do that. And a whole bunch of people reached out to see if we could do it for another day. So for the week of Cyber Monday, we're going to keep it the Cyber Monday special of $18 a month. It will never be this cheap again. And I promise you, for real this time, the following week, we're raising this to $100 a month. So if you've ever wanted to join the AI Hustle School community, this would be the week for Cyber Monday. You can get it. There's a link in the description to AI Hustle. But otherwise, let's get into all of the cool features that 11 Labs is offering here. The main thing that I think, Jamie and I were talking about this a little bit offline that's so interesting is 11 Labs has just pulled out this new feature, which is so cool. Jamie just demoed. But this is in light of Google coming out with their Notebook LM kind of tool that did a very similar thing. Now, some would argue that like 11 Labs has a much better voice, which I personally love the 11 Labs voices. But it is interesting to me that like this whole, turn a document or turn a video into a podcast thing sort of started out as Google's idea with Notebook LM. Now, what's really interesting to me is a lot of people criticize Google quite heavily because of Perplexity AI and just the fact that, Google, they all say like really fumbled the ball, dropped the ball, letting Perplexity AI come into search and is kind of taking over Google in a big way. Now, we're not really seeing massive search volume drop because of Perplexity, but people are saying like, hey, look, this is a great tool that really does replace Google search because you're able to do all these Google search or pretty much searches where you get more direct results using AI. Now, what's interesting to me is Google really fought to have some sort of standout product because of this, some sort of way to make extra money or some sort of way to stand out and have some sort of viral product. And that's really what it was with their Notebook LM. Like their Notebook LM was, I feel like, Google's viral product. That's really cool. We talked about it a lot. But now it feels like, again, they're getting disrupted by another smaller player, almost stealing like their, I don't know your thoughts on this, Jamie, but does it feel like they're like viral thunder is getting stolen? Like the one thing we said was super cool out of Google's AI is now kind of getting done by one of the top voice labs. Do you think they're like worried about this?
I mean, yeah, Google's probably a little worried about 11 Labs stealing their thunder. I mean, but at the same time, 11 Labs is a voice AI generation company, so it would make sense that they would incorporate this feature. I will say
Yeah.
Google's Notebook LM does seem more casual. It seems more natural to me, with ums and pauses and things like that. Sometimes even almost to a fault, like they're trying too hard to make it seem real. This
Okay.
podcast that I played for you seemed more professional and almost like maybe a little bit more red. And maybe that was because it was in a British accent. But I think as soon as this takes off, they're going to plug in all their other voices, and you maybe even can replicate your own voice and do your own podcast without ever even sitting in front of a microphone. It'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, to say the least. One thing that I did think was interesting, though, on that note of like ums and ahs and all that kind of stuff, this is what they said specifically about it. They said sprinkling some ums and adding some thoughtful pauses was something that they specifically focused on. They said, we debated about how much to introduce ums, ahs, ums, laughter, breathing, similar human dialogue fillers or overlays. We're aiming to strike the right balance of natural human conversation and providing utility from the content. That's Jack McDermott, who's pretty much in charge of their mobile growth. So this is so funny to me that this is like the conversation and like the thought process of these tools, right? At the beginning, it's like, how do you make it as professional as possible? And now all of a sudden they're talking about like how to make the sound as natural as possible, aka how do we like purposefully introduce mistakes or things that there was a time I remember when I would record a podcast and someone's like, you say too many times, you should record your podcast through, like you should run your podcast through this tool that pulls out all of the ums and all the filler words. Now, I mean, maybe that would still be good. And maybe everyone listening to this is like, please, Jaeden, why didn't you listen to their advice? You really should have done that. But at the same time, it's interesting that all of these AI tools now are purposely adding that stuff in. Of course, they probably don't want to go overboard with it. So like, I try not to go too overboard with it, but like, that's really what makes it feel like a natural conversation. So to me, this is so interesting. Another quote they said on this was, as we look at exceptional long form podcasts out there, we find fewer interruptions and more natural, insightful conversation flow. That type of experience is ultimately what we're aiming for while making audio narratives more accessible across voices and languages. So interesting. I don't know what your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, that is like the vibe I got, kind of like what I was saying. It did seem more professional than Notebook LM, where they were trying to be more conversational, almost like too much. So I see there's a balance, and I think they're trying to find it still. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. I think, if you ever stop seeing our video podcast and if we go to strictly only audio, you probably know at that point we've gone rogue and just turned ourselves into AI, avatars and no longer are doing the podcast in person. But we plan on sticking it out. But just it'll be interesting to see. I also think this is a great way, for people to start driving traffic to their businesses, through a podcast. It'll make it easier than ever before. We've talked about that in the school community a lot, about how, if you're wanting to build trust and an audience, a podcast is the best way to do it. So yeah, it'll be interesting
100%.
to see, how used it gets.
Yeah. So here's, when it comes to AI hustle and how to actually make money from this tool, I'll tell you, this is something that I have been doing since 2022, at least. Maybe I even started in 2021 with some AI podcasts. But like back when I was doing it, it was much more ghetto, not this fancy. You didn't have two voices talking about a conversation. I literally was going to tools. I think Well Said Labs was what I was using at the time. And I just found only one voice of their like dozen that actually sounded somewhat realistic. So that's what I used. And I would go and get, sometimes I'd write scripts in the early days. And then I went to using Jasper, an AI writing tool, which was before ChatGPT. And I was getting it to write scripts about different topics, or I'd pull blogs off of our blogs for my software company. I would feed them in, create a podcast, which was essentially just a monologue, kind of reading an article in one person's voice. But I would usually start it off being like, hey, like, I'm Sue from the, Super Mindfulness podcast. And today we're going to be talking about X, Y, and Z. And then it would like kind of just read an article pretty much. And then at the end, it'd be like, hey, thanks so much for tuning into the podcast. Hope you have a great day, whatever. So I did it like way back in the early days. And in case you're wondering what kind of results you can see from that, I actually, as an experiment, started 10 different podcasts which were all using AI generated content. I think I posted maybe like 50 podcasts on each of them over the course of 6 months or so. And I had multiple of them reach over 100,000 downloads on the podcast, complete AI generated content, which, I mean, like, it was somewhat decent content, but like, you know, it wasn't like anything insane. And so I think there's a massive opportunity there, because in every single one of those podcasts, I had a link to go download my app, and I got a ton of traffic from that. So I really do think this is a great way to promote something. And the last thing I'll say on this is, if you know, maybe you're like, oh man, I could never do like a strictly AI generated podcast for my business or brand. What I will say is, it sometimes makes a great test experiment if you start, like, let's say 10 podcasts, and you can put 10 AI episodes on each one. And then you determine which podcast actually takes off, which niche or which title or which topic around your business performs the best. So once that happens, you find the one that performs the best. You essentially can take it over with your own voice, or someone from your own company can take it over, and you can see which one works. But that's an experiment that I've run that has been quite successful in the past. So I would, you know, especially with all these new tools like 11 Labs coming out, I think this is cool. There's been actually a bunch of people in our AI Hustle School community that have been doing this with some of the AI generated podcast stuff, and are seeing some cool success, having some cool conversations around that. So if you're interested in trying out that side hustle, I'd highly recommend you join the AI Hustle School community and check out that thread all about different people trying that, what their tips, tricks are for it. The AI Hustle School community is linked in the description. And for this week only, it is on a Cyber Monday deal of $18 a month, the lowest the price will ever be. We'll raise it in the future. But in fact, by the future, I mean next week, we're going to make it $100. But if you're interested in that, check it out. Anyways, thanks so much for tuning into the podcast today. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and we'll catch you in the next episode.